Greetings and welcome to the series of videos on the digestive system. The digestive system is perhaps best known for its role in inspiring toddler humor, but there's also a lot more than what meets the eye that goes into making poop and fart jokes, namely making poop and farts. The digestive system is really just one long tube with a few random organs on the side, but it's 30 feet long, so when it's in the body, it looks like this. You've probably seen simpler versions, such as this one, but even like this with pretty colors, it's still a bit messy and chaotic and hard to see how things connect. So for the purposes of understanding the coordinated functions of the system, we're going to use a schematic like this, where the tube is stretched out so that we can see what connects directly to what. And for some processes, we're going to simplify it even further to this. So, there are two categories of organs in the digestive system that we need to learn about. The first is the gastrointestinal tract, or the GI tract, also known as the digestive tract. Now, the gastrointestinal tract is a long muscular tube that extends from mouth to anus. The food is ingested at one end. That's the mouth, just so we're clear, and indigestible material is eliminated at the other. As we move along the gastrointestinal tract, each region is specialized to perform certain functions related to digestion and absorption. Each of these regions is separated from the others by a sphincter, or a ring-shaped muscle, which allows the system to control transit time, or how long substances spend in each of the organs. So, the sphincter that separates the oral cavity from the esophagus is the upper esophageal sphincter. This is important in order to control when we swallow. And then the food that we've just chewed passes through the esophagus into the stomach and goes through the lower esophageal sphincter. This sphincter is particularly important not just for releasing stuff from the esophagus into the stomach, but also so that when the stomach is contracting, it doesn't send acid back up into the esophagus. As the digesting material moves through the stomach into the small intestine, it has to pass through the pyloric sphincter, so that controls when we let that out. And then at the end of the small intestine, there's a structure called the ileocecal valve. No, it's not a sphincter, but it performs the same basic function, which is that when material reaches the large intestine and the large intestine contracts to get it out or move it ahead, then the valve ensures that it doesn't move backwards. And finally, and very importantly for toddlers as well as the rest of us, is the anal sphincter, which controls when we let the fecal material out of the body. Even within each of these organs, there are regions of additional specialization or extra features. We are not going to talk about these, but I want you to see the terms so that when you hear them, you know what they relate to. The differences between these regions are not insignificant, but they aren't critical to understanding the overall function. The other type of organ that we see in the digestive system is the accessory organ. And accessory organs make substances that are critical to the processes that the digestive system does, but they deliver their contents through small ducts. The organs themselves don't touch the substance that they're helping to digest. So the salivary glands are an accessory organ that empty their contents into the oral cavity. And the pancreas, liver, and gallbladder, actually the gallbladder doesn't make anything, it just stores, but still, they all empty their contents into the small intestine, the first part of it actually known as the duodenum. Now, no matter where we are in the digestive tract, the wall of the intestine has 5 layers. So if we take a cross section and we look at the layers that are making up the intestinal wall or the GI tract wall, and magnify it a little bit further. It has 5 basic layers. Before we talk about the layers, though, let's just orient ourselves. So the inner part of the tube is called the lumen. We use this term for tubes in general, and you probably remember seeing it in blood vessels. But this is the internal space that the GI contents are moving through. The layer of tissue that is closest to the lumen is called the mucosa. And it's called the mucosa because it is covered with mucus, which is going to play a very important role in terms of protecting the tissue, but also in terms of lubricating it so that the contents can move through. Now, underneath the mucosa is the submucosa. This is a layer of connective tissue, very loose fibers that make it easier to run things like blood vessels and nerves for feeding and coordinating the entire tube. And then outside of that is a layer called the muscularis, which primarily has the responsibility for moving the contents through the GI tract, but also plays an important role in mixing things and breaking them up, which we'll talk about. Finally, on the very outside is a layer known as the serosa, which, as far as we know, has no function other than just being a fibrous protective sheath. But who knows what scientists will discover next. Now, even our layers have layers, of course. So the mucosa is made up of 3 layers of tissue. The muscularis mucosa is on the outside, and this is a thin layer of smooth muscle that helps to squeeze on the mucosa and allow it to secrete the substances that it's making, sort of makes it squirt out of glands. Just inside that is a layer of connective tissue called the lamina propria. And this is where smaller blood vessels and lymphatics and nerves and whatnot are running. These help to support and maintain the tissue that is above it. And also they help to absorb and carry away the substances that are transported in by this inner layer, which is the epithelial tissue. And the epithelium changes as we move along the digestive tract, but it is typically either stratified squamous, where we need to resist abrasion, or simple cuboidal in glands that secrete or absorb, especially accessory. And simple columnar is what dominates through most of the small intestine and large intestine. Okay. The muscularis, this outer muscle layer, has 2 components: a circular layer where the muscle fibers make a ring, a continuous ring around the outside of the GI tract, and the longitudinal layer, which runs the length of the tube. And these 2 combined allow for a combination of mixing and propulsion, or moving things forward. In the stomach, there's actually a 3rd layer known as the oblique layer, which allows the stomach to really do some intense contraction. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that there's sort of a repeating pattern. We can see muscle and just inside that connective tissue. And then again, we see muscle and just inside that connective tissue, and then with this outer lining. So there's sort of a difference in scale. This muscle is designed to interact with or help to control the epithelium. This muscle is working on the larger scale. This connective tissue is absorbing nutrients that have been brought in by the epithelium, and this connective tissue is moving nutrients along the intestine, starting to bring them to the vessels that take them to the liver.